welcome. You're watching Primetime Debate. My name is Aayush Ailawadi. Let's start off with our first conversation. There's a crisis brewing in Iran. The country is facing large-scale protests, similar in scale to what happened in 2009. The protests, which reached their fifth day today, quickly spread across provinces to become the largest since the huge pro-reform rallies of the Green Movement. So what can we make of these protests in Iran? What's the cause? How did they start? To discuss that, I'm joined by Vivek Katju, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. Mr. Katju, really appreciate you joining us on Bloomberg Quinn. I wanted to start by asking you what you make of these protests and what they essentially mean for the region.
It's still early days, therefore there isn't complete clarity of where these protests are leading or how deep they are and how deep will be their impact. But clearly they arise from two factors. One, economic. There is considerable economic distress in a country which has the potential of reaching middle income and being prosperous. But there are constraints arising out of sanctions, and therefore the people who had expected that once the nuclear deal was done, the economy would turn decisively have been disappointed. Trump's policies are inimical, and that too is contributing to economic distress. The second, and it is here that there's a question mark. There have been stray reports of slogans being raised in favor of the ousted Pahlavi family, as well as against the clerical establishment. And therefore, it is not clear as of now if the very roots of the Iranian system are under challenge, at least from one section. What is clear is that if these protests become wider and are sustained over a period of time, the clerical establishment and its coercive apparatus will come down very, very heavily because the coercive apparatus is committed to the maintenance of the Vilayat-e-Faqih, which is the order which prevails in Iran today.
Mr. Katju, just to understand, especially with Donald Trump getting involved and what happened at the United Nations podium earlier with Rouhani and Trump sort of exchanging these sort of insults, and their stand on the on the whole issue. President Trump in a tweet says that the Iranians are finally getting wise as to how their money and wealth is being stolen and squandered on terrorism. This didn't seem to go down too well with Mr. Rouhani, who says this gentleman in America who's now trying to sympathize with our nation appears to have forgotten that he called the Iranian nation terrorists several months ago. It becomes interesting, Mr. Katju, because while this is playing out at the United Nations level, where does Donald Trump come into a conflict like this?
I think Donald Trump has made his choices very clear. He is in favor of the Sunni Arab states, and he's gone to extraordinary lengths in expressing his support for them. He's equally gone to substantial lengths, even now he is doing so, against the Iranian establishment, and therefore, again, the real issue is that tweets and statements are one thing, but action on the ground is quite another. And there I do feel that despite the anger on the streets, which is spreading, but as I said, it's a question mark. One doesn't really know what way it will turn in the coming days and weeks. But despite that, I doubt whether the Arab Sunni states or the United States will get much purchase from the protesters.
Right. Right. So as a very quick, Right, so as a very quick last question, also, sir, obviously the Irani Revolutionary Guards have actually mentioned that they will, they have warned protesters that they will have to deal with the iron fist of the National Guard. But in terms of censorship, Telegram and Instagram, popular social networks have completely been blocked in Iran. Does that point to a worrying situation, according to you, Mr. Katju?
Clearly, since the protests are spreading, this is a reaction from the regime, which is not really committed to the to Western liberal ideals of free expression. The Iranian democracy has a peculiar and a particular system within and constraints within which it functions. After all, it is a guided democracy. Uh, Therefore, the final word is with the supreme leader, and the supreme leader is not accountable directly to the Iranian people. The Iranian president and parliament are these institutions, but they too are guided by the supreme leader and the clerics. Therefore, uh, I'm not surprised that the Iranian regime or the Iranian system has no compunctions in blocking off social media sites. But yes, it does point to a certain level of anxiety. We don't know what level it is as of now, but a certain level of anxiety at what is happening on the street.
Right. Mr. Katju, really appreciate you joining us on Bloomberg Quint. For all of you watching, thanks for watching. But stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint for our next topic, which is as India and Pakistan continue to argue over the release of Kulbhushan Jadhav. Obviously, the national security advisors from both countries are learned to have held secret talks in Thailand. So we're going to be discussing what these talks mean with former Foreign Secretary Lalit Mansingh on the show. Up next.
Are we live? Welcome to programming that's insightful, authoritative.
All right, as India and Pakistan continue to argue over the release of Kulbhushan Jadhav, national security advisors from both countries are learned to have held secret talks in Thailand. This meet was described as friendly, according to the Pakistani media, but it still raises a lot of questions as to the direction of Indo-Pak ties. So what can we or what should we make of this meeting, and will it have any effect at all on the Kulbhushan Jadhav case? To discuss that, I'm joined by former Foreign Secretary Lalit Mansingh. Mr. Mansingh, thanks so much for joining us. That's my first question to you. What can we make of these talks that were held in Thailand of late?
Well, first of all, I'm a bit skeptical about these talks for the following reasons. One, there is no official confirmation from our side, and that is a bit odd. Secondly, an event like this would make the media go to town. Nobody has, to the best of my knowledge, even acknowledged that these talks have taken place. Thirdly, after the expression of displeasure over the treatment of the wife and mother of Kulbhushan Jadhav and the strong statement made by External Affairs Minister Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, it would seem rather odd timing for the two NSAs to meet quietly in Bangkok. There would be a lot of explaining by the government to do this. And finally, the two NSAs, as we know, met about 2 years ago, exactly about 2 years ago, in Bangkok. And then after that, the hotline went cold. And our information was that nothing much was happening between the two NSAs. So I'm a little surprised and also a little skeptical. But let me put that aside. Supposing it is true, then what does it mean for us?
Yes.
Well, one, it would certainly mean that Pakistan feels cornered and diplomatically isolated, and therefore is changing tactics to make it appear as if Pakistan is being more reasonable with India and is making an overture,
Right.
number one. Number two, it may mean that Pakistan feels that dealing with India and having tension with India is not sustainable, especially as Pakistan is going through a period of domestic turmoil. The Prime Minister, Nawaz Sharif, has stepped down. Elections are coming up, and there's an air of uncertainty about what is going to happen in Pakistan.
Mr. Mansingh, the timing of this seems even more significant considering the developments in the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. It was just a couple of days after the families had actually met in Pakistan. There were so many questions raised in the manner in which that meet was conducted by Pakistan. Do you think that it could have any sort of impact on that particular case?
I was coming to that.
Okay.
Assuming that these talks took place, it could also mean something else. Remember that recently the Pakistan Army Chief, who actually is the de facto leader of Pakistan, had said openly that he will support any move by the Pakistani government to have better relations with India. That was a significant statement, except that people here were pretty skeptical and didn't take that seriously. But we also know that a couple of months ago, there was a meeting of the Pakistani Army Chief with a number of senior army commanders in Karachi, including a lot of corps commanders. And one of the Pakistani generals, in the presence of the Army Chief, declared that Pakistan should now make amends, have better relations with India, and build up economic cooperation with India. And our report suggests that the Pakistani Army Chief not only did not oppose it, but seemed to endorse it. So if this is so, this is a new tack, a new signal being given by Pakistan. And maybe if the two NSAs met, they would take this further. I doubt if the issue will be the Kulbhushan Jadhav case, because there is nothing that the two governments can do. The matter lies entirely in the International Court of Justice in The Hague. I think it's a broader issue of Indo-Pak relations, the issue of terrorism on Afghanistan, and whether the two countries should now resume a dialogue and proceed further, or India gives its tough signal saying, you stop terrorism, otherwise there is no dialogue. So I think we have to wait and see.
Absolutely, Mr. Mansingh. Really appreciate you joining us on Bloomberg Quint and sharing those insights. For all of you watching, thanks so much for tuning in to Bloomberg Quint and watching Primetime Debate.